I've started the recording, Maureen. Just give it a
Okay.
second for the, there we go, we're being recorded.
Okay, so welcome everyone. This is the ordinance required community meeting for NPA 2022-0027.01. My name is Maureen Meredith. I am the Plan Amendment Case Manager. If you haven't done so already, please let us know who's here in the chat box. We'll use that as our sign-in sheet. Please mute your microphone if you're joining by phone. Please turn off your video if you're participating online to save bandwidth. And as you know, this is being recorded. So how to participate today. The speech bubble in the menu bar at the bottom or the top of your screen will open the chat box where you can type in questions at any time. Please limit general comments until the end of the Q&A session. After presentations, you can click on the raise hand icon to be called on to speak. Telephone participants will be given an opportunity to ask questions. We will call out the last 4 digits of your phone number. So as you know, this is in the Central West Austin Combined Neighborhood Planning Area. So I'll introduce myself, then Mark can introduce himself, and then Victoria, Ron, and then if there are any, if the property owner or the client is here, he or she can introduce themselves as well. So again, my name is Maureen Meredith. I do all the plan amendment cases in the city of Austin. Mark?
Yeah. Good evening. My name is Mark Walters. I'm a principal planner at the Housing and Planning Department, and I'll be moderating tonight's discussions.
This is Victoria Haase with Thrower Design, online and representing the landowner.
Ron Thrower Design.
Good evening. This is Mike Ibrahimi from SIBO.
Okay, is there anyone else? Okay, we'll move on. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm Mike Canati. I'm not sure who you're asking to identify. Sorry, the audio in this is not very functional.
Okay, I'll move on. So again, my name is Maureen Meredith. Here's my contact information. Heather Chafin is the zoning planner, and here's her contact information. We'll also have this slide at the end of the presentation if you don't catch the information this time. Plus, my information is on the community meeting notice that you received in the mail. So the agenda tonight, we'll go over case information, how to participate in the process, why is there a plan amendment application, what is a future land use map. I'll do a brief presentation on the plan amendment and zoning request. Then the applicant will do a presentation, then we will open the floor to questions and answers. So the property address is 1809 West 35th Street. It's about 0.27 acres. The case number is NPA 2022-0027.01. Project name is SHQ West 35th. The request is to change the future land use map from neighborhood commercial to neighborhood mixed use. The associated zoning case number is C14-2022-0021. The zoning request is to change the existing zoning from limited commercial neighborhood plan to limited office mixed use neighborhood plan for professional office and residential. Actually, the LR is neighborhood commercial. Property owner applicant is MEA Real Estates Ventures LLC. The agent is Thrower Design with Victoria Haase and Ron Thrower. So the guidelines for group discussion, please feel free to type your questions into the chat at any time during this meeting. Please postpone general comments during the Q&A session. After staff and applicant presentations, if you would like to speak, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand symbol on the menu bar. Telephone participants will be able to speak during the Q&A session as well. Attendees will be muted upon arrival and through the staff and applicant presentations. Then staff will open the floor to answer questions in the chat or by attendees raising their hands. Similar questions may be grouped and answered together. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking for the sake of sound quality and clarification of conversation. If you're having connection issues, please turn off your video until called upon to ask your question. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the speakupaustin.org NPA website. You can email or call me or Heather with any questions or comments you might have. If you have written comments, they'll be added to staff case reports. When the cases are scheduled for Planning Commission and City Council, if you live within 500 feet, you will get a notice in the mail with the date and time of the public hearings. So why is there a plan amendment? Neighborhood plans are adopted by City Council as amendments to the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan. City Charter requires zoning changes to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Most MPAs are amendments to a plan's future land use map, and most MPAs have an associated zoning application. This map shows the areas in blue that have City Council approved neighborhood plans, most of which have a future land use map. This is what the plan documents would look like, and they have the goals and recommendations in the text of the plan. This is the future land use map, and these colors represent broad land uses. For this property, it is the neighborhood commercial, which is shown in red with white dots. The proposed neighborhood mixed use would be brown with white dots. This chart shows how the proposed zonings fit within the broad land uses. This is a map that shows the neighborhood commercial flum. There it is with the red with the white dots. The next maps are just general aerial photos. This one just shows the property location. This is a Google map that just shows some of the surrounding uses to the property. As you see, the red pin is 1809 West 35th Street. This is a future land use map, again showing the neighborhood commercial. This is the zoning map, shows the LR zoning. And these are just screenshots from Google Maps of the property. View east on West 35th Street, view west, across the street. So this is the broad growth concept map from Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan. This just shows the property in zoomed in relation to that map. So you see West 35th Street is an activity corridor. This map just shows some public transportation. That ends my presentation, and I will stop sharing my screen. So, Victoria, you can start yours at any time.
Okay, give me 1 second.
We can see it.
Okay, great. Again, Victoria Haase with Thrower Design. So the image in front of you is the site, same Google image that you pulled, Maureen, for this location. So it is a property that was originally developed with a single family house and was converted to commercial use several decades ago. And there is a second dwelling on the site that was built sometime in the 1950s or around 1950s and remains today. So the Flum Amendment is requested to reflect the true mix of uses that has existed for several decades now, originally as residential, single-family residential, and then eventually taking on commercial uses. Concurrently, we are asking, as Maureen said, for rezoning from LR to LOMU. And the change from LR to LO is a downzoning. It does not require an NPA. However, the residential use that we are seeking to retain is driving the need for a neighborhood plan amendment for this site. So this is a table showing the hierarchy of commercial zoning districts with intensity building from left to right. And the request for LO based zoning district moves in the opposite direction, or I guess I should say, moves to the left, being less intense than the current zoning of LR today. In terms of uses between LO and LR, there are 17 commercial uses that will be lost with the rezoning, with the downzoning to LO, and there are 2 uses that will be gained. And of course, the adding of the MU overlay will add the ability for the legal ability for residential uses. So many of the site development regulations remain the same with the change from LR to LO, but going line by line in this table. So the property has LR today and has 5,750 square foot minimum lot size requirement, and that's the same under LO. And this site at 1809 West 35th Street meets and actually exceeds the minimum lot size requirement. Same goes for width. There is a 50-foot lot width requirement that this site does exceed. And the height, the maximum height between the LR and the LO zoning districts is the same. It allows 40 feet today, 3 floors, and with this rezoning will also allow 40 feet and 3 floors. Setbacks are similar, but there are some differences. So between LO and LR, generally speaking, there is a 25-foot front setback. But because this site is a small site, there are a little bit of relaxations in the front setback. So we're probably looking at anywhere from 20 to 25 feet for the front. The interior side, which would be the east and the west lot lines, under LR, it has a zero setback requirement. Under LO, it has a 5-foot setback requirement. For the rear setback, under LR, it's 0, and under LO, it's 5. However, because this site is surrounded by single-family use and single-family zoning to the south and a little bit to the west, compatibility does trigger. And so what that means for this site is there is a 16-foot compatibility buffer where building cannot go. So in terms of building coverage, that remains the same between both zoning districts. They both allow 50% building coverage, which equates to 5,917.5 square feet of this site. Maximum impervious coverage is actually today, they are allowed 80%, which equates to 9,413.6 square feet. And the site today actually has, according to city data, has somewhere in the ballpark of 72% impervious cover. So they have the ability to achieve more impervious cover today. However, with the rezoning to LO, that impervious cover limit will drop to 70% and equating to 8,284.5 square feet of impervious cover possible. And then lastly is the maximum floor to area ratio. So that is the driver as to why this property owner is seeking a downzoning. For whatever reason, LR has a 0.5 to 1 floor to area ratio, allowing for 5,883.5 square feet of building. With the downzoning to LO, there is a 0.2% increase in the floor to area ratio, allowing for a building that is at most 8,284.5 square feet. So the proposed development for this site is going to be a 3-story, 40-foot building, podium style, meaning that the ground floor will be parking, and that will be 18 spaces at this point in time. The second floor is anticipated for office at around 4,300 square feet. And the third floor is where the residential units will reside. And each unit is estimated to be about 800 square feet in size. So this is a two-dimensional layout that is to be expected. The site is pretty small, so there isn't a lot of room to move beyond the parameters of what you see here, but the light blue teal color is the footprint of where the building would go. And within that, you can see the area, the hash or kind of bricked pattern of where the balconies are proposed to go. They would be facing towards Viva Day Spa. In the back of the property where you see the green, that is the no build compatibility setback. And then parking would be underneath the building. And in addition, there will be some parking that extends south of the building towards the rear of the property. So we met with the Briker Woods neighborhood back on February 23rd. And there were a number of questions that came forward. And so I'm going to address some of those questions right now. So some of them I've addressed in my presentation, but so it is planned for 4 residential units. And with regards to how many employees, it's anticipated that on a normal business, a normal business day of the week, anywhere from 8 to 10 employees. There are more employees that work for the company, but here in the Austin area, I believe there's 20 or less, and half of those work from home. So, the units will be for rent. They are intended to house employees of the company here in Austin. And as I mentioned, they will orient towards the west, towards Viva Day Spa, as well as the balconies will orient that direction too. And as far as the willingness to prohibit short-term rental, it is planned that one of the 4 units will be held for purposes of housing family and or employees from out of town periodically. And during times when the unit is not occupied, it will have the same right to build and ability to utilize STR provisions like all the other properties in the neighborhood. Know that the landowner and at least 3 employees of the office here will be on site regularly and have a high interest in ensuring that any sort of STR use is appropriate and follows the rules and is a good neighbor. With regards to, we heard desires of wanting assurance that this development will not seek any increases in height through a bonus program offered by the city. And I'd like to find out more about that this evening, perhaps as we get into the discussion of the case. But moving down as far as parking, as I mentioned, parking spaces that will be required. There are 26 parking spaces according to the numbers that I gave. 26 parking spaces will be required with this development. And the redevelopment will utilize parking reductions. And so that the number 18, that number was derived from a 30% reduction, 20% for being inside the urban core, and then another 10% for some of the other provisions. I believe it was related to the smaller car spaces. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. So with that, that is the end of my presentation. But again, as I mentioned, I want to open up and I want to ask more about the concern for the bonus program and offering additional height and which particular program that is. And then I would like to be able to also hear other questions and comments. I know there was a desire for us to be able to show maybe some sort of concept plans. And at this time, we don't have any concept plans to show. There are some design elements that we can share verbally, but we don't have any visuals to show at this time. So with that, I will.
Thanks, Tori.
Yes.
I'll start with questions. There was a question from Mike Canati, and he said with With these preferred reasons for creating less intense LO zoning, will the applicant agree that variances will not be requested?
And Mike, this is Ron Thrower. Are you talking about variances in the sense of public hearing related variances? Are you talking about waivers to the code that are sometimes referred to as variances? It would be our goal not to have any variances associated with this, but almost every project does have waivers.
And let's see.
Sorry, Ron, I was muted for some reason.
All right.
I'm using the word variance just in the generic sense of a departure from the existing rules. I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by waivers, but if you had to go before a board and get buy-in from the neighbors or the neighbor association before any of the boards or commissions to alter what the existing entitlements are, we're wondering, is that something that you're being open to, or are you willing to commit that that will not be something you request? I'm just curious.
Well, again, if it's a variance that requires a public hearing, we have no desire to go down that path. But waivers that I'm referring to may be a transportation waiver, maybe a commercial design standards waiver, things like that that are more administerial and don't really affect the overall, project per se. But would we be asking for a height variance? No. Would we be asking for a setback variance? No. None of that would be needed.
Okay, there was another question regards to will VMU or vertical mixed use zoning be requested or required as part of the zoning case associated with this NPA?
We have not asked for VMU. We've only asked for the mixed use overlay.
Okay. Now, hope I get your name right, sir. Gerald Balaka? Or Balaka?
Yes. Am I off mute?
You're unmuted, and please ask your question.
Okay, so in the last meeting I did ask, so it has been documented by the wastewater department that the property is sloped towards the rear to drain on the residential properties, but nothing was mentioned about this in the presentation. Will that be addressed?
Yes, so any redevelopment of this site is going to have to comply with current water quality, current detention requirements. So yes, that will be addressed. Everything
Well,
that's
how
on
will
that
you
site,
address it?
everything that's on the site today did not have to put in any sort of infrastructure on site when it was constructed. So as far as how will it be addressed, that I can't speak to yet because we've not gone into a full site planning mode. There's, we still need to get an engineer involved to look at those things, to look at the topography and how the site can accommodate. But know that it will be addressed in one form or another because the city will not give us a development permit without addressing it.
Okay.
Okay, because it's hard to recommend it without knowing what you plan to do on that. Because it is sloped towards the rear, so.
The
That's been
drainage
documented by
patterns,
wastewater.
the drainage patterns through there have always been sloped towards the rear of the property from everything that we've been able to find. So there's no other way for us to discharge the stormwater than through the rear of the property. Can we find ways to attenuate it, slow it down, do whatever? Yes, we can. That's, again, part of the site development process.
Okay, well, in the original plat map, the original properties did have spaces left for an alley. An alley was never put in, but spaces were left for that. So, I mean, it just was never in mind that you would build, that something like this would be built.
Well, I've looked at the plat map and I've seen nothing that says that there was ever an alley proposed, built, or anything back there.
Well,
And
there
it's
were
commercial.
garages had setbacks for an alley originally.
Or
You can see it in
garages,
the plat map.
or garages were built behind the house and still accessed from the property, not from an alley that was never built. But again, you know, it's a historic drainage pattern. We're going to look at it in more detail. And we'll do, you know, what we can that may be necessary to, like I said, attenuate the flows back that direction.
Did you have your question answered, sir?
Well, you know, we would like some answers about how that will happen.
Okay, okay. Also, there's a question from Michael Curry. To simplify the question about bonus programs, I think, are you agreeing not to seek or accept a height greater than 40 feet?
This project will not, we will not be seeking any bonuses for additional height. And I'm just wanting to know, is the bonus that y'all are thinking of or y'all referring to, is that with regards to like affordability unlocked or?
I can answer that. I don't know. It could be, or, you know, they're developing, as you know better than I do, I'm certain. The city's considering different corridor initiatives or things involving vertical mixed use, and there's affordability unlocked. And, you know, they're giving consideration to all of those in the, for want of a better way to put it, post-code next environment. So whether that comes to pass or will come to pass or doesn't come to pass, there may be initiatives to allow greater height than what the zoning today, if it was granted, would allow. And I'm just, since you have specific plans in mind with a specific use in mind, and you're going to be building a structure that presumably will last 20, 30, 40 or more years, would you be willing to give a restrictive covenant that says, you know, that restricts the height to 40 feet or 41 feet to give you leeway, or, you know, something like that? Would you be willing to do that?
Well, I mean, it's something that we can talk more about. I wanted to understand if it was the affordability unlocked aspect that was the concern, because it's, I mean, you know.
I think I can, again, the city has different initiatives and they're considering different things for corridors that might allow greater heights than what the base zoning would allow. Those may come to pass, they may not. But you have plans, you're doing this not on speculation, but for a specific purpose. So whether those come to exist or not, you said you're building within the 3 stories or 40 feet. So my question is, just so we don't have to worry about that, and there would be a greater ease in trying to you know, a greater comfort level in trying to accommodate this, would you agree to a restrictive covenant that limits the height to 40 feet?
So I think we can explore how to do that, like how to address the concern or the desire to know that this development is only going to be 40 feet, 3 stories. And if it's by way of some form of a restrictive covenant, we can look at how to make that happen. But let me get a little bit more details and before we give you a specific answer. But I do think there's likely a way that we can give y'all the surety that y'all need.
Right, and I didn't expect you to say, yes, I have one in my back pocket prepared for you. But there's certainly a way, it's an easy way to do it. And I think that would, you know, give the property owners that are on 34th Street the greatest assurance and, you know, and comfort with this. And it doesn't have to be for all time until, you know, the earth no longer exists. It could be for 20 or 30 or 40 years of life of that building. So, so that at the end of that time, if your client wants to sell the building or something, that's fine. And someone has a different idea, it's just that for some period of time, typically we say 40 years the life of most structures. Just a restrictive covenant says you won't build above 40 feet or, 40 feet, 41 feet in case, during construction something happens or something like that. So before I have a position on this, I would need to know the answer to that, but I didn't expect you, unless you just anticipated that, to get an answer today, but I would need that to know. So appreciate it.
Okay, good.
Yep.
There's one, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. There's one more question in the chat, and then someone has their hand up, so I'm going to do it in that order. And then I'll go to the phone calls, see if anybody who's on the phone has any questions. The question is from August Harris. What is the applicant willing to give to the neighborhood in exchange for the additional 2367 square feet of development? I guess that'd be to Ron or Tori.
Well, off the top of my head, there's going to be a much better street presence, a much better pedestrian environment than what exists today. Additionally, the site is going to, address the I guess issue with drainage leaving the site to the south. So those are just immediate benefits to the area. But as far as, you tell me, what would the neighborhood like to see? What would the neighborhood think would be, helpful in this area that maybe could be accommodated through this development?
Okay. Well, I'll go to Brad H. If you could unmute Brad and ask your question.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, with Briker Woods being an iconic central Austin neighborhood with several young kids, of which every neighbor that this backs to has young children, what assurances can you give us that those balconies are going to, face at a slanted orientation to the north to allow for privacy, especially with those families with young kids?
Well, if you look at the way the property is, how it's sized and shaped and oriented, I mean, it's a long, narrow, I don't know if I can say long, but longer than it is wider, right? And so just designing the property and a building to go on that site is going to, like I said, create a situation where you've got a long, narrow building. And in order to get 4 units within that long, narrow building, those units, they wouldn't be oriented towards the rear. If you've only got 55 feet of width to play with on the site, and you've got 4 units on one floor, it doesn't make sense to organize the site. There isn't a way to organize the site and the units within the building so that they would face towards the south.
I've seen several buildings out there with a 45-degree slant to the balconies to allow for privacy that would face towards the north to allow privacy for the neighbors backing to it. So maybe that's something that can be taken into consideration for the sizable square footage you're looking to add with these with the zoning change.
Yeah, absolutely. We will certainly take that into consideration with the architect.
Yeah, I mean, I could supply pictures with where I've seen balconies facing at a 45-degree angle to allow that privacy, and that would be my recommendation at a minimum to allow that privacy.
Yeah, I really think there's a good way to design it so that it's very, I would think that the houses to the south won't see the balconies, immediately to the south, so.
Yeah, I think the concern would be balconies and windows, especially with short-term rentals, i.e. party pads. We talked about that in the earlier call and limiting and not allowing those. So that is a surprise, I think, to all of us on this call and a disappointment because of the neighborhood aspect, especially with those being on the third floor and the privacy factor for all residents that are going to be on the south end of the property.
Thank you. And I'm going to go to the phone calls and just ask if you have a question. If not, no need to ask if you don't. Will the individual with the number that ends with 3199, do you have a question? No? Okay.
This isn't 3199, but can y'all hear me?
This is 6262?
Yes, my name is Jonathan May. How y'all doing?
You're the next one in line, so ask your question, Jonathan.
Excellent. So our property will be the one just to the west of the proposed site, which I really appreciate Brad's question because it's my backyard. That if those balconies are situated on the west side of the property, our backyard will be the one that any residents of those units will be staring down into. So I want to echo that concern. That is going to be probably one of the biggest factors in this for us. We have 3 children. Also, my daughter's room is in the rear of the house that faces directly to the backyard on that northeast side. So she would literally be closest to that, which doubles my concern in that regard. So any assurances that you guys can give us that that's going to be taken into consideration. I'm also concerned around the short-term rental possibility of these apartments. Particularly, I'm thinking about things around, say, like a South Fi incident where you have people coming in. Would these be up for a rental like that? I don't know if that's a type 1 or a type 2, but can you give me some clarification around that?
So the 4 units that are proposed, 3 of those will be for use by employees of the company. Okay. And the 1 unit that is contemplated to be reserved, the primary reason for reserving that 1 unit is to accommodate family members from coming out of town or employees that are coming into town that don't work here in the Austin area. And so, you know, when the discussion was had about that 1 particular unit and we got more clarification about that 1 particular unit, you know, it was decided that, you know, if that 1 particular unit is not going to be used in times when it's not used by either A, family, or B, out of town employees, you know, to have the ability to utilize that particular unit for a short-term rental is something that they would like to hold on to at the moment and retain, you know, much.
And yeah. Where is that? Do you have the location of that unit? Would that be the one closest to the back of the property?
We've not even thought that far ahead yet. So that's something that we can put on the list of things to discuss and have the architect work on as well. But yes. Yeah.
That would be something I would very much like to hear, again, because the way that lot is canted, even if those balconies are turned towards the north, they're still going to have a very, by default, unrestricted view into our backyard. So, or I'm sorry, canted to the northeast. So anything that can be done to maximize privacy in that regard, as well as anything that could limit the ability for other than family members, you know, if it's a general short-term rental, to use Brad's term, party pads, that would be something we would be very interested in preventing.
Okay. thank
Understood
you.
on that. And I'll just also add that, you know, the owner of the property is going to be occupying the property for his office. So it's in his interest to not have a party pad there at all. And if
Good.
there is a situation, he's going to be right there on site to deal with it.
Good.
Yep.
And I apologize if I'm asking a question that is outside the bounds. It's my first time doing this, but do we know who this guy is? What, I have not heard the company name or any of those different things. And I'd love to meet him, frankly.
He's on the call. Mike, if you
Oh.
Sure.
want to introduce yourself.
Absolutely.
more.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Mike Ibrahimi. We are a software company based in Austin, Texas. We work with a lot of small businesses and help them to have an better online presence. So yeah, nice to meet everyone.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that.
Okay. So there's the one more person with a phone on the call who ends with 6687. If you have a question, you could hit *6 to unmute. If not, I'll wait a second. And if you don't unmute, I'll assume you don't have a question. And while we're waiting, there was in the chat, Ron or Tori, do you happen to know who the architect may be?
Hold
The
on.
architect is Michael Diani, MadWorks.
Okay. Okay. Well, there's a question from Robert Cartwright. Says, will the owner be living in one of the units? If not, how can we be assured that this STR won't be used as a party pad after hours? I don't know who would want to field that question.
So it is not planned for the owner to live in one of the units, although his family members may stay there when they come to visit from out of town. But he will be there during office hours, but also too, there will be employees that work and live in the building. And if there are any issues going on, can notify the landowner, can notify Mike quickly. Again, as Ron said, you know, even though he may not be staying there overnight and over hours, I know Mike wants to be a good neighbor and wants to be sure that his property is being taken care of and used appropriately. So, you know, Mike, if you want to speak up to that, but I know that he would want to know if there were things going on that shouldn't be going on.
Absolutely. Like Victoria said, our goal is not to turn this into a rental unit, to be honest, because this is going to be our home for our company. I've moved about 5 times in the past 5 years. And I believe I think Mr. Mike Canati actually shared my About page. You can learn more about my history. I moved to Austin about 16 years ago. I love this town. I love my neighbors. So I definitely want to make sure that we don't create any issues for anyone around us.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any more questions or comments? If you can just, you can raise your hand or put it in the chat. And so, well, while we're waiting for that, Maureen, do you want to put up the slide with the contact information?
Okay, here we go.
And once that's up, you could tell folks where we are in the process and what the next steps are. And if not, if no one has any more questions, maybe you can wrap up a little early and we don't have to go to 7:30. So what are the next steps, Maureen?
Okay, so next steps. The plan amendment, excuse me, my team will meet and we will make a plan amendment recommendation. The zoning team will meet, they'll make a zoning recommendation. We'll start working with the planning contact team on getting their formal recommendation. Then we will start scheduling the cases for planning commission and city council. They have not been scheduled yet. For people who live within 500 feet, you'll get the notice in the mail. I think we're still having, as far as I know, into the future, virtual and in-person meetings. And let's see, if you have any written comments, you can send them to me. We'll add it to the staff case reports. When you get the notice in the mail, it will have a comment form. You can send that U.S. Postal Service to us, or you can scan it and email it to us, and those will be included in the staff reports as well. That's it.
So, anybody else have any more questions? If not, we can wrap this up. Ron or Tori, do you have any final comments?
No, I mean, we will continue to be available, and our information is on the I believe it's on the letter, as well as it's in all the documents that are submitted with the city. So please reach out to us if there are more questions that we can try to answer. And Michael Curry, we will look into and explore the request you had about the 40 feet and 3 stories, and how that might be able to give the neighborhood some reassurances moving forward, because he's not looking for anything like that. So, but yeah, it would be helpful if we could do that for y'all.
While we were doing this kind of next steps, a couple questions kind of popped up. One of them was from August Harris. You could please tell the architect to lower the plate height per floor so you won't need all 40 feet. Then from Mike Canati, Marine, your procedure still has staff prepare recommendations before the hearing from the neighborhood plan contact team. And I think that I can answer for that. Prior to sending the staff report, we would really like to have something from the contact team indicating either their support, their opposition, or their neutral stance for this case. Also, back to August Harris, he said it'd be good to provide a massing model if all possible. And no more questions, just a comment that from Michael Curry to Tori. So do we have any other questions before we call it a night? Okay, Joyce Bassiano, would you unmute and ask your question, please?
Okay, I'm just curious about this short-term rental. Is this a business-owned building with property, or is it owned by one person? And would it be a commercial short-term rental or considered a homesteaded one?
Well, it's a commercial property. So I'm thinking that it would not be a homesteaded, but I would have to look into the details of short-term rentals. Admittedly, I'm not abreast of all the minutia of short-term rental goings on.
August Harris typed in the chat that he says it would be a type 3, I think, because it is a commercial building and it's a multi-family unit. I'm not, again, I'm with you, Tori. I don't know the ins and outs of the STR regulations, but that sounds about right to me. But you might want to go look that up and get a more definitive answer.
Yep, we will do that.
Okay.
So we had Roya Johnson attend late. Roya, do you have any questions? We were just kind of wrapping up.
My question would be, when they're talking about rentals, are they talking about doing something like WeWork, that they lease the spaces to different people coming in and using offices there? Is that what they're talking about?
No, that's not on the table at all. This office space is to be utilized by the company that Mike owns and his employees. So the discussion about the discussion that was taking place was with regards to the four residential units.
Okay, but the offices will be basically office. So one of the questions everybody I think keeps asking, in one day, how many people will be coming to that location, including the residents and the people who are officing there? Total of how many, and how many parkings will be provided?
So eight to 10 people in a normal office day. And the parking spaces that are anticipated are 18 parking spaces. And
Where
to
are
be
you getting
clear-
that 18 parking places?
To be clear, this, Mike's company is not one where they, where people come, where their customers come to their building and engage at this site for services that Mike provides. So really, majority of the time, it's going to be just the employees coming and parking here and working in this building.
As well as the 3 residents and the sometimes
Correct.
residents.
And so the 3 residents will also be working, so they're employees and they also live there. So it's, the parking accommodates both uses.
Joyce, you had another question. You unmute and ask your question, please.
Yeah, this is a kind of unusual business model, isn't it? Where has this taken place? In Austin? Where else? Where the company president, I'm assuming Mike is the company president, has residences for the employees on site. And are these employees paying rent, or are they just living there? I've never seen a business model like this. Just curious.
I can answer that question. So basically, some of my own staff are pushed out of Austin because of the fact that they couldn't afford to buy a house. In fact, one of them, Peter Sanseri, recently is looking to buy a house outside of Austin. So because we are working in a hybrid solution, we're not in the office every day. So there are going to be days that we're not going to even at the office. I did a survey a little bit earlier in the year. I asked everyone, how often do you guys want to be in the office? And they said maybe twice or maybe maximum 3 times a week. And I personally think that's going to be the solution with this remote hybrid, perhaps work from home, situation. But some of them, when they are going outside of Austin and they come back, they want to have a place where they could stay if you want to work for 2 days or 3 days consecutively, right? So that's the reason why we are thinking about having this perhaps hybrid situation.
What is the square footage on one of those apartments? You have 4, right? You have 4 you're planning?
Correct. The square footage is anticipated to be somewhere around 700 to 800 square feet.
Okay.
Another question I had, I'm sorry I was late. I had another meeting to go to. What is actually the business does? Is it just office? What kind of office is it? Is it a lawyer's office, or what kind of a business is it?
We are a software company. We help mom and pop shops with their small business. Majority of our clients are actually perhaps bridal and prom shops. They sell wedding gowns. So we help them with their website and we help them with their marketing.
Okay, so you're a marketing and website design company.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Then there's a question from the chat, and it's from GM, that I thought I heard you say 26 parking spaces. It's only 18 total, and I think you reiterated quite recently that there would be 18 spaces. Is that correct, Ron or Tori?
Yes, that's what's anticipated with the numbers of square feet of office use and then the residential units. 18 parking spaces is what would be provided after reductions are taken for urban core and providing other amenities as well.
There's a question from Robert Cartwright. Do you ever foresee more people working / living in the building than you have parking spaces, creating the need for some kind of overflow parking in the neighborhood?
I would honestly say probably less people than what we have, because everybody, this is one of those, because of the situation right now with the jobs and staffing, as you all know, everyone prefers to work from home. So remote working is one of those things that is considered as a perk. So we don't consider it to be, back full time, work 40 hours in the office. So like I said earlier, it's going to be a hybrid solution, and our goal is to actually have more remote work here than in the office.
Thanks. Another question, Joyce, if you
Yes,
unmute, please.
this is for Mike. If your business grows and you outgrow the building, will you move or will you try to expand here? Because we've had cases where, we've had other businesses there, they've outgrown the building they were in and they moved.
Sure, that's a really good question.
Structure.
My business has doubled every year with less amount of people in Austin, to be honest with you. And by less amount, I mean working in the office. And the reason being is we were forced to actually work remotely. I do have a lot of folks that actually work for me outside of Austin, but this is going to be my home. I don't intend to sell it. I don't intend to perhaps rent it out as an office. We simply needed a place for us to not move every single year or every other year. So the goal is to keep it as is and just make it work.
I have a question for staff. What are the occupancy limits for buildings like this, for residences like this that are only 700 square feet?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. My dog was letting me know someone was at the door.
Oh, well, show them the door, Mark. What is the occupancy limit for these 700 square foot residences? I mean, how many people can you have living legally in that building?
I don't personally know the answer to that, what the limit is. I think it's a measure, and again, this is just thinking, a measure of the size, the number of bedrooms. And I'm not a building inspector or really ever been involved in reviewing that. So I'm not one to be able to answer that question.
Because 700 square feet sounds like you barely have room for one bedroom. If it's an apartment, you have a little kitchenette or something, it's kind of like a micro apartment almost.
Actually, 700 is a pretty good space. It's like one bedroom, one bath, kitchen. So 700 is pretty large, actually.
I've lived in an 800 square foot apartment that had 2 bedrooms.
Yeah,
I have as well.
They must be tiny, though. I'm just watching very large houses being built around me, so I'm just wondering, what the going square footage for a bedroom is these days.
There's a question from Jim in the chat. It says, what if you end up being fully remote? And I guess this is to the business owner and then the applicant. Would the apartments then transfer to non-employee rentals? I'm trying to understand potentially having 4 apartments that are mostly being unused. That would be a lot of valuable real estate sitting idle. And it says it could be 2 bed, 2 bath, but that would be kind of tight for the second bathroom. But I imagine, a good architect could design it in a way that works.
Sure. Our intention, sorry, I'm going to answer the first question. Our intention is not to be fully remote. Otherwise, I wouldn't make this investment, to be honest with you, because we still want to go back, because there's a sense of community when you see your own employee at least twice a week. And we lost that creative mind a little bit because we're not seeing each other in person. And I miss working with my own staff. I think we were most creative when we were actually working together. So our intention is not to go remote fully at all.
Okay. So any other questions in the chat, or anyone want to ask anything before? Seems to be kind of running out of a little bit of steam in the question side. So when we were here till 7:30.
Yeah, I had one.
I had one too.
Okay, wanted to get Jonathan, correct?
Correct.
Okay, 6262.
I
Then we'll go to Joyce.
I didn't hear the answer to the potential overflow scenario for parking. Heard the number of spaces, 18, but is there a plan for overflow parking?
There is not a plan for overflow parking. I'm not sure that there would be a need for overflow parking, considering the situation. But the property is also along a Imagine Austin activity corridor and has access to transit. So, my hope is that people, not only of this development, but other developments would utilize some of that as well. But there's not a plan for overflow parking.
Okay. Joyce, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, this is for staff. Are you going to capture the meeting chat and put that online with the recording of this meeting?
We generally do not. It's usually just the recording, the video recording of the meeting. The MP4 file is what we post online. And so we've been doing since we went to a virtual format for these meetings.
Okay, but a lot of Zoom
I just
meetings.
want to add, but let me just add though, when I write the case report and I summarize the meeting, I do go to the chat and cut and paste comments and add it to,
Okay.
the questions are answered and those are summarized in my meeting notes. And then comments I cut and paste into the case report as well.
Well, some Zoom meetings, you're allowed to capture the chat, and that's very helpful for the attendees. So if you could, since you're going to get the chat anyway, Maureen, can you make that available to us somehow?
It'll be in the case report.
Wait, who is that? What
you said, Maureen, that it will be in the case report?
So yeah, so what I do is I cut and paste the comments and add it to the summary of the meeting under a section called comments. So Joyce, are you wanting me to separately cut and paste all these comments and send it to the planning contact team separate from my case report?
Sure, you can capture this chat just the way it is tonight and just send that.
I've never done it. I don't, if there's a way to capture it when the meeting ends, and I know I can do a attendees report. I don't know if Teams has a way to capture, summarize comments within the chat box.
What we can do is we can look into it and let you know one way or the other.
Yeah. Can I have a question to staff?
There is one more question right now, then I'll get to you, ma'am.
Okay.
From Robert Cartwright. Is there a way for the drainage to be rerouted to 35th Street?
And I'll respond to that. I think it's doubtful. There's no storm sewer lines or drainage infrastructure in front of the property for us to tie into. But we can ask.
Okay. Thank you. So, Ms. Johnson, you ask your question?
Yeah, the question I have, what is the, I'm asking the city staff, what is the parking requirement for a project like that? What is that you all ask them to have minimum for their parking?
It's a measure of the square footage of the office space plus, depending on the number of bedrooms that each unit has, then you would add those two numbers together. And then you would remove, because of this is located in the urban core, you get a 20% discount. So whatever that number of adding those two things together, then take 20% off of that, and that would be the required parking. That's my understanding of how that works. But I would have to have, I don't remember the exact specifics that Tori had earlier in her presentation. She had some numbers, but knowing that those were just kind of rough numbers, giving a proportional what could be done, what could be and couldn't be done. If I'm speaking out of turn, Tori, please let me know. But I would have to know what the total office space is, and I don't know what that is since they haven't hired an architect at this time.
So in order to get to the parking calculations, we, office space, the parking required is 1 space for every 275 square feet. So we took the proposed amount of office space that's planned and divided that by 275. And then for residential units, the city requires, I believe it's 1.5 spaces for every 1 bedroom, and then another 0.5 for every additional bedroom. So yes, that would be 2 parking spaces for every 2 bedroom unit. And so with 4 2-bedroom units, that's 8 parking spaces. And then, so that gets you to the required amount of parking. And then the city of Austin does allow for parking reductions if you're in the urban core. And then there's reductions for other things, such as including showers in your development so that people can take alternative modes of transportation, such as riding a bike. And that way they have the ability to ride their bike. And when they get to work, if they need to, they can shower before they get to work for the day. So there's other things that can be done, and with 18 spaces, that assumes a 30% parking reduction off of what would normally be required for properties that either are outside the urban core and or are not providing those other benefits to the employees of the building.
So you're parking it to code is what you're telling me.
Correct. We are parking it to code.
Any more questions? It's 7:12. We'll be wrapping this up in scheduled to in about 18 minutes. But if nobody else has any questions, we can call it an evening. And I see Ron is typing something in the chat.
Ron is not typing anything in chat.
Oh, it sure looked like he did. Well, Teams is not telling the truth to me here. So anybody more questions? Okay, Joyce, you have.
Yeah, I'm not being facetious here, but in the past, people have gone down to the one-stop shop with drawings of what they'd like to do on a napkin. Even if it's a hand-drawn drawing of this concept, give us an idea of what this thing is going to look like, this building is going to look like. There's one building on 34th Street that has parking on the ground and 2 floors above. And it's been there for many years, but I'm trying to visualize what this is going to look like. And would appreciate, even if it's a sketch on a napkin, like I said. Thank you.
Okay, I have a thing in the chat. Okay, from someone from Lita who's lives on 30 or has a neighbor across the street. Again, any more questions? If not, we could wrap up. Yeah, Tori and Ron, the contact team and folks have your contact information?
Yes. At the very least, Michael Curry does. So if you want to reach out to him, you can get his our contact information through him. Or you can reach out to city staff, to Maureen or Heather. Or you can go to www.throwerdesign.com.
Okay. So with that, seeing no more questions, we could call it a night, and we can get to, I think Tori is entering some information in the chat, looks like. If not, we can, yeah, Victoria at throwerdesign.com is her email. and Ron T at throwerdesign.com is Ron. So you have the two folks, the two agents' contact information, their email. And Maureen, anything you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, I'm good.
Okay, well, thank you for your time tonight. And again, if you have questions, you can contact staff or Ron and Tori. And with that, thank you for being here and asking questions. And again, if you have more, you can contact staff. And with that, I'd like to wish everybody a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone, for participating.
Take care. I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you.